Joan Quinn is the former West Coast editor of Andy Warhol's Interview magazine and society editor of the Herald Examiner. Her cover stories are seen in Venice and Detour magazines, and she is a contributing editor to Angelus magazine. For the next half hour, Joan will bring you inside news and views on society, art, film, and the exhilarating worlds of these multifaceted people. Here is Joan Quinn.
Actress Lisa Pelikan was determined to be a dancer, but that obstacle that hits all dancers, an injury, stood in her way. Welcome to Etc. And Lisa, tell us what happened. Where were you living at the time?
A suburb of Washington, D.C. My father was an international economist with U.S. Treasury Department, and I had grown up in Rome and Japan before we arrived in D.C. And yes, I had been a dancer. And
you look like a dancer.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment.
Beautiful.
But I'd been very interested in mathematics and science, and that's where I thought my life was going to lead me. But I had spent a summer working with a theater company as a dancer and as a director. And at the end of this summer, a bone tumor was discovered in the marrow of my left tibia.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yes.
Oh, it was a terrible
So I
injury.
I spent my entire senior year of school in bed, having to lie absolutely prone while the marrow filled in and the bone healed, and I could put no weight on it at all. So in the process of this...
Were you still studying? Were you still studying at that time?
They had tutors would come to your house, and so I kept up with all my studies, and I was always a very good student. So,
I would think so if you were interested in having a math or scientific career.
Yeah, so schooling was very easy for me, so it didn't require a lot of effort for me. So I decided that I was going to go to this wonderful college, whatever it may be, study mathematics, and as a hobby, I would direct on the side. And I would have this great theater department where I could practice that. And in the process of trying to find a good theater school department in the college, I went to New York to see some of the theater schools there. And when I went to Juilliard, there was a woman there who's the administrator. And you have to realize I walked in with crutches, and I still had a cast on my leg and everything, so I was kind of limping in. And I sat down at this desk, and this woman said, well, how can we help you? And I said, well, I'd like to find out about your school. And she said, well, read that. And she handed me this newspaper article from the New York Times talking about the first graduating class at Juilliard.
Oh.
And I sat there in her office and I read the whole article. I said, this is really nice. Patti LuPone, Kevin Kline, all those people.
Was it the first time? Had it just been open to acting at that time? Or?
It had been open for 4 years, and the first class had just graduated that year.
Because I never realized that Juilliard was an acting school. I always think Juilliard and music.
Yeah, no, their music was their first department, and then they added opera, and they added dance, and then finally they added theater.
So they had a good first-year class when you went in.
Great first-year class. But I sat there and I read this article, and I said, this is really great, but it doesn't tell me anything about your school. And she leaned over her desk, and she said, I don't know what makes you think you could ever get into our school.
Ooh.
So I said, okay.
Oh, this poor little girl with her crutches.
Well, maybe you could show me around your facilities or something. And she had her assistant get someone to show me around, and I got to see the school. And I went home and put my application in right away and auditioned. I had to do 2 pieces, classical and modern, and got accepted with a scholarship.
How did you know? How did you know what to do? Had you ever acted before?
No, had never been on a stage before in my life except as a dancer. As an actor, I'd never been on a stage. I called up Mrs. Allen, Mrs. June Allen, who had been the artistic director of the theater company I had worked with during that last summer as a dancer and as an assistant director. And I said, what do I do?
Oh, that's how.
And she told me exactly what to do. She said, you must do comic pieces because you're funny. I said, okay, sure. Okay, so I did Catherine of France from Henry V, where she is speaking French and she's learning how to speak English.
Oh, and you speak French?
Well, I'm very good with languages, so I was able to do that. And Agnes from the Apollo of Bellac by Jean Giraudoux, which is about a very plain, timid young girl who learns the secret of life, and then she becomes very beautiful and bold. So I did those two pieces.
Were you still impaired when you went on to?
I had just gotten my cast off my leg when this all happened.
So fate really did wave its wand at you. And once you went to work, once you went to school there, John Houseman became a great teaching.
Yeah, he was a champion of mine. I loved him, and he was a great support of mine. He used to take me aside and say, now, Lisa, you must read the great classics. And I said, I do. And he said, but you must read Anna Karenina, and you must read War and Peace, and you must identify with the older, more mature woman. I said, okay. So I would just read and read and read and do what he said. And
so those were your tidbits. Did he have any kind of little secret things that he would help his students with to give you a little edge over anyone else?
No, I actually only worked, he didn't really teach.
He didn't teach?
No, but he directed the operas there. Oh. And all the first-year drama students had to participate as, I guess, glorified extras, like, bring on serving trays and carry the spears in all the operas. So that's the only time I actually worked with him. And it was actually a lot of fun because he was very complimentary to my little non-speaking part. So
when did you come to Hollywood then?
In 1976. I had my fourth day in New York City, I should say, while I was still in school. This man found me in the audience of a show. It's another long story, and he became my agent. And when I left school, he moved out to LA and took us with him. So I just came with him. I had been working at that point in the theater, and I had done Hallmark Hall of Fame tape television and things like that, but I'd never done any film. So I think I had $1,000 in the bank, and I bought my round-trip ticket and landed in LA, yeah. And I was very lucky. My second week here in New York, in LA, I got my first TV movie, which is I Want to Keep My Baby with Marielle Hemingway, who I just worked with again recently. It was the second time we've ever worked together, so it was fun after so many years to work together again. And then 2 weeks after that, I got Julia, which was my first feature film, and went off to London and worked with Fred Zinnemann. So
that was a wonderful opportunity for you.
It was for acting, but also for directing. We had a little incident that happened between us on the very first day of filming, where we were filming this scene. It was crossing the log, and we shot me and the other little girl walking up to the log, and then the stunt doubles did the scene actually crossing the log. And everyone was down in their big waders in the water shooting up. And after they finished shooting it, I was standing behind Zinnemann. He turned around, he said, okay, print, wrap. And he saw me there and he said, oh, what'd you think of that? And I said, well, it wasn't very good.
Ooh.
And he said, well, what do you mean? And I explained that if I were going to cross a log, I wouldn't have crossed it that way. And I explained how I would do it. And meanwhile, everyone was packing their gear and, going and leaving. And he said, no, everybody back. We're going to do it again. And so they shot the scene again. And then he turned to me, and this time he really asked me, he said, what did you think of it that time? And I said, well, it was much better. And so from then on, he used to call me his little assistant director.
Oh.
And everywhere he went, he would take me with him, and we'd talk about shots together. And he'd say, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And that's the part that I really enjoyed about Julia, is my relationship with him. But acting-wise, as soon as it was over, I ran back to New York and got back on a stage as fast as my little feet could carry me.
And then you stayed in New York for a while?
I stayed in New York for a while and kept being lured back out to Hollywood till now I live here. So
You
and I love it.
You didn't miss Hollywood, making movies rather than being on the stage?
It was acting-wise. I Want to Keep My Baby and Julia were horrible experiences because we didn't rehearse. We were shooting in the middle of scenes. I had no control. I couldn't. I felt like I couldn't say, "Excuse me." I'd really like to shoot that over again. I mean, I could voice my opinions, but I felt like I had no control as I do on stage, where it's my performance.
But also, when we started talking earlier in the interview today, you said you wanted to be a director. You have that in the back of your mind in a way. Do you think you'll end up as a director?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I do, but not for a while. Bruce is actually directing right now for the first time. Bruce Davison, my husband.
When did you meet Bruce? You came back to Hollywood. Let's get into Bruce Davison, who is a terrific actor too.
Yeah, he's great. We met 5.5 years ago at a theater party. We were both doing plays out here in Los Angeles. I was doing Blue Window. Norman Renee directed, Craig Lucas wrote, who's also the team that wrote and directed Longtime Companion that Bruce received an Academy Award nomination for. Anyway, I was doing that play, and Bruce was doing The Normal Heart with Richard Dreyfuss, and we met at a theater party, and we've been together ever since.
Are you planning a family, or is that in the cards?
Let's say that it's something that I'm thinking about, and Bruce would like if we had already done that yesterday. if it were up to him. So, thinking.
Yeah. How do you handle your schedules with a 2-actor family marriage?
Very carefully. We find, or at least I guess I should say, I find that I have to give up certain things that I want to do just so that we can be together, and our marriage can take priority in our lives.
Because that's really important. I know you were in Blue Window. Blue comes again in your career.
Blue
the return
Lagoon.
of the Blue
Lagoon. Yeah.
Return to the Blue Lagoon, and you were away. Talking about separating, you were away for a long time in Fiji.
Yeah, I was in Fiji for 3 months, and then as soon as I finished that, I went down to the La Jolla Playhouse and worked with Des McAnuff on Twelfth Night.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and so I was away for another 3 months, so that was 6 months.
How do you manage those? Did Bruce meet you?
He did come down, and he met me in Fiji, and he did meet me in La Jolla. And he travels a lot too, so I go where he is, so that we can be together.
Do you have any other interests besides the stage and theater? Do you collect art, or, as you can see, we're going to have a photographer on with us.
Actually, I'm going to be at an exhibit tonight where she's going to have some of her work.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So Jane Gottlieb will be joining us, and we'll talk about some of her photography, and maybe that'll either lead you to collecting or lead you to being a photographer.
Well, we collect, and actually I paint.
Oh, you do? Oh, so there is a great time.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Thanks. We're back again with Lisa Pelikan, and joining us is photographer Jane Gottlieb, who is celebrating the publication of her new book, Car Tales, with an exhibition at the Francine Elman Gallery in Los Angeles, and also an exhibition in Aspen, Colorado at the Grand Champions Club. How did your book get started, Jane?
Well, I've been taking car pictures for years and years, and I was approached to do this book, and they went through thousands of pictures, and I've been painting on my pictures, so they wanted me to make them all a little more beautiful than what I'd started on.
But thousands of pictures? Who would take thousands of pictures of cars? Why would you be taking thousands of pictures of cars?
Well, I'm an LA girl. I've always loved cars. They're beautiful art pieces all unto themselves. And in the 50s, they used to have great colored cars everywhere, coral cars and turquoise cars. And so I've just always shot them. Also, they have a lot of personality. I like junked cars and trashed cars and cars covered with dust and cars in the weeds, you know.
I think it's great because the press release for this exhibition talked about the great Lamborghini and the Ferrari and the Rolls Royce and the Bentley and the Cadillac, and it was like they were describing movie stars. Come and see these pictures of these great stars. So you just explained why.
And I mean, there are a lot of rare cars in this show too. But
well, why don't you show us,
let me show you
first
a
of
few.
all, show
Yeah.
us some of the cars pictures and tell us where you found them.
Well, most of these I shot in the 70s. I used to drive around a lot on Sundays and take pictures, and they were washed out old deserted cars as well as beautiful ones. Like this one had no color in it. It was a white car and a gray tarp and a white building. And when I ended up starting to paint on my pictures in the last 10 years, I found I had all this raw material of pictures that I could make more exciting and more colorful and more intriguing.
But you develop it in a process called sebachrome, I guess.
Right.
Tell us what sebachrome is.
Okay, sebachrome is the only archival color printing process. It'll never fade. And I paint.
And let's just show a sebachrome print, just to show
here's
what
a
it looks
sebachrome
like.
print, and here's a painted one back here.
This doesn't necessarily mean, sebachrome doesn't necessarily mean the color, it means that it's archival.
It means that it's archival,
see.
that you could hang it outside and it won't faint, unlike most photographic prints and all other photographic prints. And I paint with the dye that's usually used for retouching, and usually use just a spot. So I started this technique, and this was the first image I ever painted where I really was intrigued by this image, but when I started painting the sky blue and the grass greener and the flowers colors and the whole thing, it became
So you can
much
just
more
see
alive.
It's more of a painterly thing on top of an already color photograph.
Right. And what happens also is that the dye is absorbed into the print because the print turns into a sponge when it's wet. So the dye is absorbed in, and when it dries, it's just a saturated color photograph.
So we don't call you a photographer, we call you a painter.
Yes.
Show us some other car photographs.
Okay, here's a 57 T-Bird porthole with a nice reflection going on. And, you know, cars are incredible symbols of freedom and independence. And then, you know, the T-Bird, I mean, in Los Angeles, a T-Bird is a very special car. Anyway.
That's great.
Actually, this show is called Dream Machines.
The show is called Dream Machine.
Yeah. And this is a part of a cord. I like details. And when you see the original picture, there's no color in it. It's a white cord. And so I get really into the painting aspect of it. I love adding colors to it.
So we're not really looking at a car that was that original color. We're looking at a painting of a photograph that you took. So
Right.
You've created the whole ambiance of the piece, every piece to it.
Right.
I mean, you've created each little part of the big piece.
I started as a painter, and then I got into photography later. And so now I've brought them both together. And I love the painting part of it.
This one is great. I love this.
Yeah, I mean, this...
Yeah, that is great.
It's got a lot of personality, but now I keep enhancing the skies and adding all sorts of reflections, and when this image is 30 by 40 and really large, I get even more carried away with it.
The photographs in the show are larger than
Yeah, the
this.
photographs are real big. Here's this great dusty Ford that was covered with graffiti. I think I took this in 1972 on this abandoned road, and you know, and it's one of my favorite shots, and it always has been. I never wrote anything on it. I always seem to find these cars and just shoot them instead of set up something. And then I, you know, found it in my files when we were doing this car book, and started playing with them all. And anyway.
The book, show us this, because this really reminds me of the title of your book, Car Tales.
Yeah.
This is the tale of a Cadillac. Did that have anything to do with it?
It didn't, but it should have, right? I mean, the classic Cadillac fin is just, it's a beauty, but to find a perfect magenta hot pecan is impossible, but now I could do it.
The book, the substance of the book are really short stories written by classic
wonderful authors.
How did you find those? How did you find the stories to go in the book?
Oh, I worked with the publisher, and they found the stories. And they sent me the different stories, and I read them, and none of the stories are very fluffy. They're all pretty intense stories.
And then, this is
F.
one
Scott
of my
Fitzgerald.
favorites.
Yeah, this
is
Drake Bentley.
Isn't it?
It's got a lot of mystery. It's funny.
Looks like she's wearing a dress.
Yeah, I mean, it's really
like
reminiscent of a glamorous 30s movie star.
Do you have to use a certain kind of lens or certain camera? I don't know much about it, so you'll have to tell us a little bit about your camera.
I use Nikon cameras, and this is just a straight 50 millimeter lens without any distortion, whereas many pictures I use a fisheye lens or wide angle lenses.
The fisheye, I think people always hate the fisheye if you're photographing people because it gives you this funny kind of roundness.
Yeah.
But it works so beautifully in a landscape type of thing.
It really does. It takes in everything and creates a whole world.
Did you use fisheye with any of the cars?
Yeah, some of the cars I used fisheyes, yeah. But that's all I brought on the cars. Except for this is a portrait I did of friends with their car.
This is an editor from Angelus magazine.
Right.
You were on the cover of Angelus, the May issue.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how they came, found your house, and what was so interesting about it.
Well, besides painting my photographs, I've always painted my houses bright colors and worn bright colors, and they usually stand out. And they heard about my house, which is very, very colorful. And they came out to see it, and they thought it was really unique. And the garden, at the time my garden book had just come out. These pictures are from the garden book. So they wanted to do something about a woman who's very colorful and has gardens, and I have a beautiful garden too.
We have another book.
Yep, here's my other book.
Yeah, that's the cover, Garden Tales.
Right.
Car Tales, Garden Tales.
Right, that's the idea.
Do you plant your garden?
Yeah, I planted all with great colorful flowers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very meditative to work in a garden. It's sort of like taking photographs. It's very meditative, or painting. You know, it's something you do on your own, and you see something happen very fast. And I like working in the garden.
What kind of background do you have as far as going into painting and photography?
I studied at UCLA. I studied painting, and I was always a painter from being a little girl, and always took photographs from being a little girl. And somewhere in the mid-'60s, when pop art got very popular, and I found I couldn't paint very realistically, so I got more interested in my photography. And at the time, I was an art director in advertising. And I was using really wonderful photographers like Francesco Scavullo or Sid Avery, and they were all really gracious, and they taught me a lot about photography. So I never took a photography class, but I worked with all these wonderful photographers.
You just experimented with your camera and came out like this?
Yeah, I was always experimenting with my camera, and in the darkroom, and with painting and retouching and airbrushing. It's just, I'm passionate about my art, and I've always been doing it in one way or another, or in every way.
Do you think this would transfer to film? Did you ever think of that?
Yeah, I have thought of that. Yeah, it would. I just have so much left to do with my painting on my photographs, but I would love to get into film sometime.
Have you made any movies at all?
No, I haven't made any movies.
I know, just from reading the article about you, that you're a great collector of lots of different little things. Tell us what you collect.
Well, I love 30s deco objects, and so I love the speed form water pitchers. You know, the Bauer water pitchers, or anything deco, and I love to travel, so I mean, part of the fun of traveling is taking photographs and shopping, you know, and buying little things.
Do you shop, Lisa, when you travel?
No, mostly I take in and look. I love traveling more than anything in the world.
Do you collect also?
Not quite in the same way.
You collect little
You haven't seen my-
small objects?
No, I collect large objects.
Do you?
Yes, large paintings.
Oh, you collect large paintings?
Oh, you do? That's great.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm actually, next week, my sister and I are going over to London for a while, and we're going to go up through northern England, and
There's so much to buy in England, it's just frightening, actually.
To buy and to photograph.
Yeah.
Because talking about the gardens and the greenery.
Yeah.
Are you going to be looking for anything in particular?
No, people.
People?
My thing is people. I love getting to know different people from different parts of the world.
Well, that's great. So what is your next project?
Well, I'm working on monuments, actually, from all over the world. From
Like the Colosseum?
like the Colosseum, like David in Florence, like
That's my favorite
the
city.
pyramids in Egypt. Yeah, I went to school in Florence. I know
you
you lived
did?
in Italy too.
Oh, Florence, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am always working on these monuments, and I've been shooting a lot of people lately too, and painting them and doing portraits, and then painting them in the same way, and loving doing that.
The first time I met you, I asked you if you did portraits, and you said, no, I don't shoot people. I don't do that. So I'm so happy that you're doing it now, because I think it's a wonderful extension.
I think I needed to paint them, because when I used to do portraits, I would give the person the picture, but it didn't become my art. And now that I can paint it, it's more my art, and you'll like the picture. You know?
Good, yeah. We have to close, and it goes so fast. But Lisa, what's your favorite thing in Los Angeles?
My favorite thing in Los Angeles? The ocean. I love the ocean.
Good. And Jane?
What's my favorite thing in Los Angeles? Actually, the people. I love the people. Isn't that funny? I love the people in Los Angeles. They're
I
great.
love Los Angeles, too.
I love it, too.
And I'm glad you were both with us today. Lisa Pelikan and Jane Gottlieb, thanks for coming with us to Etc.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.